So we're going to start off with accommodating resistance. So you might have come across this before, the use of bands when you're doing trap bar deadlift, pressing, squatting. And this is basically to try and increase the amount of load towards the top end of the lift. So how it can benefit boxing in a very specific manner. So we're increasing the length-tension relationship. Got a good slide on that in a short while. We're working with taller athletes with longer limbs. So the taller athletes will struggle to bit because they've got to work harder throughout the range of motion. It's encouraging them to to keep accelerating all the way up through the movement. It's the stimulus to drive through the sticking point. So especially with pressing, athletes tend to slow down through the mid-range of the movement, and I'll explain this in a couple of slides. So it's a stimulus to keep on accelerating, because if you're not accelerating through the sticking point when doing the accommodating resistance, you're going to struggle to get it up. Increase tricep activation during pressing exercises, and then reduces the eccentric load coming down on the movement. So this is the length-tension relationship explained. So, or length-force relationship. It's known as a length-tension relationship, but Alan likes to call it the length-force relationship. In close range, we haven't got enough length on the punch to be able to elicit force. There's an optimal position where you're going to be able to generate more force. At the end range, not being able to get as much force, so down here. Whereas like in this mid-range, this is the sweet spot, as Karim Gerfi found out when he thought he had Jordan done. Jordan was thinking about length-force relationship in that corner. So you can see there, it's got that optimal length of the muscle, where basically it's generating the most amount of force. Whereas like in the other ones, is smothering his work on the inside, not being able to generate as much force, and then at length, not being able to generate as much force. In theory, this is what accommodating resistance should be able to do. Be able to create more force at longer ranges and being able to spread this more. So, for example, if Karim Gerfi didn't step in there and he was a little bit further back, because Jordan's done a lot of accommodating resistance training, he'll still be able to generate more power towards the end range of his shot. Just saying about the sticking point, and the snap at the end range of the movement is really important for muscle activation during punching. As you can see in this really technical graph that I've drawn here, taking me back to Microsoft Paint days, this. Basically what you see is a double pulsing activation. Activation through the delivery of the punch, and then through the mid-range, what happens is that the arm in particular relaxes. The reason why it relaxes is because if it was tense, then the fist will end up, basically it'll be decelerating. Okay, so we want to go fast, loose, and then snap at the end range. So we target this through isometric training, punch isometric training, but this is a general kind of muscle activation pattern that they'll have. This equals like probably weaker biceps and triceps, in particular weaker triceps when they're doing pressing exercises. So this will challenge that movement through the sticking point. And you see here with this athlete, which is Lerone, this is his velocity during a rack press. So from a concentric movement, laid on the bench and driving up 80 kilos on the bench press. And then you can see here on the first one, it's pretty good. When he starts fatiguing and it's struggling, drops down and then spikes at the end. So it looks very much like this. Okay, so this is basically highlighting that velocity is affected through this little drop here, that relaxation, because he's unable to keep accelerating all the way through. To get a better score on this, a higher velocity, you want to be accelerating all the way through the movement, as he's done in the first one. And if I'm perfectly honest, this is done after it's done accommodating resistance. So this is actually improved from original scores. We just couldn't find the original data when he was pressing before. Especially with Lerone, he's got quite long arms. He boxes at range, so this is really important for him to master. What you see with the bands, so 70 kilos plus the bands, is you're seeing a bigger drop off. So this is showing that it's further challenging driving through that sticking point. So he's having to accelerate for longer to make sure that he's creating that tension through the top. And you can see the spike at the top of the movement can actually transfer into being able to snap at the end range. But then he's challenged there to be able to keep accelerating. So then that will transfer into his presses to look a lot more like that. Like I said, this is data after he's actually done a block of this. So before that drop would have been even more.
Favourite way to load up the banding trap bar deadlift, really. So it's literally just to loop it under the main sort of body of the bar at the back, loop it under the handles, and then the athlete creates the resistance themselves by standing on it. Like, there's all different ways you can do it. This for us with a red band, you're anywhere between 24 and 27 kilos of resistance at the top of the movement. So we say as a very general rule of thumb, it adds 25 with two bands. We've measured that out with the crane scale, and to be honest, by this point, when you're up, whether your hips are there, whether they're there, it doesn't really make too much difference. So we're happy and confident to say that this setup now, which is really easy to do, followed by standing on it, getting yourself nice and set, and then being from there, and then it kind of really secures in. What I'll get you to do, I'll probably get you to, so that's 160, it's going to be 195 at the top. So just have maybe between 2 and 3 reps of it. Just get familiar with it. So stand in the middle. You can use your hands to pin it down as well, yeah. Yeah, let's just have a look at 2 reps and maybe 2 or 3 reps.
Should we get Jim away on it?
Yeah. We'll do it after. We'll have a go and then we'll just see. Sound. Next one's faster.
Hey.
Lovely. That'll do me. Yeah. Sound cool. Awesome. How was that?
Alright, yeah.
Cool.
Feel the bands on me, mate.
Yeah. So especially around what sort of part of the lift? Did you feel it kicking?
Getting to the knee.
Yeah. Sound. So that was on the graph before. That was kind of where there was that little drop off.
Put on, let's say 40 kilos worth of band resistance.
Yeah.
Okay. That's going to be so hard to move at the top.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that will limit the amount of load that you can actually lift at the top.
Right.
Okay. So you'll put less load on the bar.
Yeah.
When you get down to here, you are underloading that movement from there. The only thing that you're making hard is the top. Yeah. And then because the 40 kilo resistance is so high, you won't be able to put as much weight on there. So in fact, you're probably underloading the full movement. Even though it feels like it's getting harder as it goes up, the full movement isn't as loaded. So that's why I put on that slide, the sum of load is so important to look at what is at the midpoint, what is at the top point.
Yeah. So
like with this system here, we know that at the top of it is generally around about 25 kilos. Shoulders pinned back. Remember, we've got to accelerate all the way through. 0.7. Yes. 0.65. Come on. Okay, a little bit of length.